So hello there and welcome to another tutorial. My name is Tande Bakshi and today we're going to be going over how you can use the new Siri shortcuts feature in iOS 12 to create an application that can use custom intents with SiriKit. It's really interesting. It's a new feature by Apple and it really allows developers to make much better use of Siri than they ever could have done before. I'm sure you probably know that last year, or actually last year with iOS 10, Apple introduced SiriKit so developers can actually incorporate their applications into Siri. So for example, you can send, say, a WhatsApp message directly from Siri instead of having to open up the application, allowing other developers to use it. But there's just one problem. Unlike the Google Assistant or Alexa or any of the other personal assistant libraries out there, SiriKit had predefined intents with their own entities that you as developers could use. However, you could not define your own custom intents or entities, and therefore you were limited to the domains that Apple provided you. And if you tried to use a workaround, it wouldn't be, abiding by the human interface guidelines, and so you were very restricted with what you could do. But with Siri shortcuts, iOS becomes a whole lot smarter even with your application. Siri shortcuts actually enable the user, first of all, not only to access your application and other applications through Siri, but it also makes the whole of iOS more intelligent. For example, let's just say that you like to perform a certain action. Maybe you go to a certain website or check your email at a very specific time of day every single work day. What's going to happen is eventually iOS will learn that pattern, and after a few days or weeks, it'll automatically start recommending to you straight on the lock screen or on Spotlight whether or not you actually want to jump straight ahead to that action. In fact, users can actually define their own custom shortcuts as well. For example, what they can do is actually put together these really complex Siri shortcuts workflows. And that's what I'm going to be showing you how you can do today. So today I'm going to show you not only how you can actually develop a custom Siri shortcuts application, but also how you can create different Siri workflows and how they actually work. Let's get into it. Now, first of all, though, let's focus on the application and how it's going to work. Now, I decided to go with a very simple use case, but one that's fun and should really highlight where Siri shortcuts are useful, getting information or giving information to applications. Now, if you were watching WWDC this year, I'm sure you've seen the demo of Siri shortcuts. This one was specifically with the Tile application, where you can say, "Hey Siri, I lost my keys," and it'll actually contact the Tile application to ring up specifically your keys tile so you can figure out where it is. However, what you need to realize about Siri shortcuts is that they are very literal and specific to the task that they've been assigned to. For example, let's just say you were following another one of my tutorials on the Watson Assistant or the Alexa or the Google Assistant. You know that they can create interactive chat experiences where you can actually interact with the application. So if you were watching just my a video that I published very recently with Mark Sturdivant, we actually implemented the Watson Assistant onto the Alexa and Google Assistant, and so you can actually talk to the Watson, for example, rent-a-car application, and it would go through a whole conversation workflow. Siri shortcuts is not like that. So, for example, let's just say you have 5 tiles, and there's one Siri shortcut to find a tile. That Siri shortcut is going to be hard-coded to find specifically one kind of tile, or whatever else you may be finding or doing. And so that's something you should definitely keep in mind. It's very specific to what you're trying to do. And so every different action that your user takes in your application will need to have a separate shortcut attached to it. Nonetheless, let's take a look at how you can implement it in your applications with a simple example, gathering random trivia facts about numbers from the Numbers API. You may have heard of the Numbers API before. It's a really interesting API that gives you all sorts of facts about trivia, around numbers, but it gives you all sorts of trivia or facts around the current date or a specific number that you give to it or a random number, practically anything. And it also has a very simple to use API. It's quite literally just a GET request to a single endpoint, and it doesn't even give you JSON, it just gives you plain text that you can go ahead and display in your application. So the app that we're going to build from scratch is very simple. It's just a button on a screen that you click, and it shows you in a message a random trivia about a number, any random number. And then what happens is that can also be extended to a Siri shortcut. So for example, let's just say that every day after you're done work, you exit your workplace and you like to look up a random trivia fact about numbers. Well, Siri is actually going to learn that and start recommending to you whether or not you want to do that completely automatically and directly from your lock screen. Or you can actually add that shortcut to Siri as a voice command. So you can raise up Siri, say, "Hey Siri, show me something new," or "tell me something about a number," and it'll automatically tell you some kind of trivia about a random number from this API. However, before you can get to that though, there are 3 main steps that you need to handle in your application. Number 1 is, of course, the most important, and that's making sure that Siri knows exactly what you want to do with SiriKit. It needs to know what your shortcut is going to do in the first place. Now, this is called defining your intent. So essentially what you're going to do is take your intent, all the parameters that it needs from the user, and all the parameters that it's going to give to the user, and you're going to define that so Siri knows exactly what the user is talking about and how your application is going to handle that user input. Then, when you've defined the intent, it's important to let Siri know that this is something valid, something that the user actually wants to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to donate the intent. That means that you're going to take the intent that you just defined and you're going to provide it to Siri as an IM interaction object. And what that means is that Siri knows that this is something that the user has done, and you can also provide supporting information or data that can be helpful in making a prediction. We won't be getting into that in this tutorial though, as that's very, very complex, but we'll get to that in another tutorial very soon. However, what you can do from here is, again, as I mentioned, donate the intent. But let's just say that you've got a really complex app with, say, 5 different possible Siri shortcuts. Now, let's just say there are only 3 features of your application that your user ever uses. Then in that case, you're only going to ever donate 3 shortcuts, or you're going to donate that shortcut every time the user uses that specific feature in your application. If they don't use a feature, do not donate the shortcut. That is Apple's guideline, and that will ensure that Siri only recommends shortcuts that are relevant to the user and what they want to do. Back to what we were talking about. Then, once you've defined and once you've understood exactly how the donation scheme is going to work, then you go ahead and donate the intent. So let me give you an example with trivia. Now, in terms of trivia, this is really, really simple. It's just we define the intent once, which is essentially just saying, all right, the intent is get a random trivia about a number, and we're going to provide a string called trivia. And then after that, every single time the user, not when they open the application, but every time they specifically query for a trivia, every time they do that, we're going to donate that shortcut over to Siri so that Siri understands that, hey, this time is when the user was actually trying to look for some trivia. After that is when the really interesting part comes in. Then you've got to implement some code that actually handles the intent. Because you see, if you're not handling the intent, then Siri has no code to call in your application to actually figure out what the intent means and what the user should be given. So first you're going to define, then you're going to donate, and then you're going to handle the shortcut. It's as simple as that. And then, once you've got this all implemented, you're ready to go ahead and implement your app with Siri shortcuts for intelligent predictions on iOS and custom voice commands that the user can actually use in their custom Siri shortcut workflows. And so that is just a quick example of how you can create your own Siri shortcuts. Of course, there is a lot more that you can do with Siri shortcuts. You can actually create your own custom UIs as well with Siri shortcut. What that means is that you can actually go ahead and say, display a graph or display a certain image on your Siri shortcut. So right as the user actually activates the voice command or force taps on the shortcut on the lock screen, it'll automatically show them a custom user interface that you have designed for your shortcut. But now though, let's get into how you can actually implement this intent. But before that, let's get into a demo of how it works so you understand the application that we're going to be building. In fact, I'm going to show you how to build this entire application from scratch and from the ground up. Let's get into it. All right, so now let's take a look at a demo of the application in action. As you can see on my home screen over here, I can go ahead and click on the number trivia application. It's a really simple user interface. Essentially, I just click on the Give Me Some Trivia button, and it instantly queries the number API in order to tell me that 13623101155 is the total number of items of mail that went through the Canadian postal system in 1950. How randomly fitting. So I click on OK, and I can just keep doing this. I can keep on asking for some trivia. It says over here 600 is the maximum credit score considered poor, thus limiting available credit in the USA. I can just keep going here. From there, though, what I can do is take a look at the shortcuts feature in action. Now, usually, of course, you can swipe up and take a look at Siri's suggestions for different shortcuts that it thinks you may want to execute. However, in this case, we haven't donated the intent enough times, or Siri doesn't think that the intent is relevant enough to my needs right now to actually display it over here in Spotlight. But since I'm a developer and I want to test my application, what I can do is go to Settings and scroll down to the Developer page. Once I'm there, I just scroll down and I click on Display Recent Shortcuts and Display Donations on Lock Screen. What this is going to do is it's going to actually show me, right as I go into Spotlight, the recent shortcuts that were donated into the Siri Kit system. As you can see, on the top is the Get Random Trivia shortcut. In fact, if I were to click on it, it would instantly provide me some trivia without me needing to open the application directly from Spotlight. In fact, it says over here, here's some trivia. 441 is the number of squares on a Super Scrabble board. Pretty interesting. Now, if I were to exit this, we can do something even more fascinating. Let's open up the Shortcuts workflow application. I'm going to create a new shortcut. Now, this is where you can build your own custom Siri shortcut workflows. Now, inside of here, I can search for different kinds of actions that I can apply inside of my Siri shortcut workflow. Now, either I could search for something, or I could click on Siri suggestions, and it would suggest a bunch of different shortcuts that it thinks would be relevant to my needs. Now, either I could search for some kind of shortcut, or I could click on Siri suggestions right over here, and it would show me suggestions that are important to my needs. But I'm not going to click that button right now. I'm going to search for a shortcut. In this case, I'm going to search for trivia. Now, as you can see, it recommends in the Siri suggestions pane, Get Random Trivia. So I'm going to click on it, and essentially this shortcut is now going to run my number trivia application. I'm going to click on the options menu on the top right, and I'm going to give this shortcut a name. Let's just say number trivia app. Going to click done, and then I can even provide it a Siri phrase. I've already recorded a phrase for this one. It's called show me a number trivia. If I were to click done and then done again and done once more, it should register the shortcut in the Siri system. And so now not only can I go into Spotlight and take a look at those suggestions, but I can actually activate this through Siri. Let's take a look. Show me a number trivia.
Number trivia says, here's some trivia. 1982 is the average price for a Major League Baseball game ticket in 2004 in cents.
That is pretty interesting. And now, as you can see, I do not need to do anything. I don't need to open up my application. Directly within the Siri voice interface, I'm able to ask my application for some information, or even adjust what my application is doing based off of some information that I provided inside of the shortcut. Now, what I need you to realize is that this is a special kind of shortcut. As you can see, this shortcut did not open my application. It just queried some information from the application in order to run it inside of the Siri voice interface over here. Now, what that means is that this is a shortcut that supports background execution. My application can be closed or in the background while Siri is able to query it. Now, Siri Shortcuts provides priority to specifically shortcuts that actually have support for background execution, meaning that if you're able to, always make sure to enable background execution to enable a better interface for your users, allow it to be more flexible, but at the same time, make it so that, well, you can have this kind of priority access inside of the Siri Shortcuts system. Of course, there are many other ways to access it, like through the lock screen, and I've already shown you Spotlight as well. All right, and so that is a quick demo of Siri Shortcuts in action. Now let's actually go ahead and build this entire application from scratch. Let's take a look. All right, so as you can see on screen right now, I've got the latest version of Xcode, Xcode 10, installed on my Mac running macOS Mojave. So now what I can do is I can create a new Xcode project for the application. This Xcode project, we can just create a simple single view application, and we'll call it something like Number Trivia YouTube Edition. I'm going to click return and create it and save it on my desktop. Once that's created, as you can see, it's created a very, very simple application structure for me. However, I don't want this application structure or this Xcode project structure because I want a version of Xcode that's actually able to support CocoaPods. Now, if you haven't used CocoaPods before, essentially they allow you to install libraries like, for example, Alamofire, or frameworks, in this case frameworks like Alamofire, into your Swift applications. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run pod init, and it's going to initialize a CocoaPod file for me, which I can then go ahead and edit. Now, in this case, I'm just going to remove all the unnecessary lines, and there we go. I've got a very, very simple pod file, and I'm going to pod Alamofire. I already do have a few videos on the Alamofire framework, which you can take a look at on my channel as well. Essentially, Alamofire will let us make the very simple network connection that's required to get to the Numbers API. I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go ahead and do pod install. Pod install will install these CocoaPods and actually it's going to create a new Xcode workspace instead of my current Xcode project. And this workspace also includes a new Xcode project for the pods. I'm going to go ahead and open up that Xcode workspace. And there we go. It opens it up in Xcode. Now, as you can see, I should be able to, well, if I open this up once more, maybe close it. Wait just a moment, and there we go. As you can see, I'm able to access my Number Trivia YouTube Xcode project from here. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is let's get the trivia handling out of the way first. So before we concentrate on the view controller or the storyboard, let's create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file called trivia. Okay? Create that file and import Alamofire with it. Then create a new class called trivia and create a function called getTrivia. Now, there's going to be a completion handler because this is going to be run in the background. And I'm just going to define that completion handler right now. It's going to be passed a string and it's going to return nothing. That string is going to be the trivia. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an Alamofire request. This is going to be a really simple request. We'll fill in the URL in just a moment. And let's get a string response. So let's get trivia response. Then let's do if let trivia is equal to trivia response dot result dot value.
So if this does indeed exist, then call the handler with the trivia, and there we go. The trivia class is done. We just need to fill in this URL over here. That should be very, very simple to get. Just open up Safari, search up Numbers API Trivia, and as you can see, pretty high up on the list, there should be Numbers API. There we go. Now, as you can see, it tells me random/trivia is the endpoint to call. So I'm just going to do /random/trivia, and it gives me this plain text. I'm going to copy this URL and paste it over here. But oh, what do we have here? As you can see, this is not an HTTPS endpoint. It's not using SSL encryption, and therefore iOS does not trust the link. So you have to kind of force iOS to use this link, and this is not an optimal solution by any means. I'll tell you that right now. There are definitely better ways to handle app transport security is what it's called, but a way to kind of circumvent this for now, since we're not dealing with anything important, is go to your info.propertylist file, add a row, and call it application transport, or just app transport security settings. It's going to create a new dictionary for you right now, and then inside of that dictionary you're going to add a new row, and this is going to be allow arbitrary loads. Now you're going to set this to yes, essentially to tell the iOS application don't care whether or not it's SSL encrypted, just make the load, doesn't matter. And there we go, your trivia class is now successfully done. Now you can go to your view controller. In fact, I don't even think we need the foundation import, do we? No, we do not. From there, you can go to your view controller and actually start implementing some interesting code. So you don't even need to override view to load because it's so simple. You just need to do IBAction function get trivia, and there we go. Then once you created this IBAction, all you need to do is say trivia dot get trivia, get the trivia variable, and then you're going to create an alert. So you're going to say alert is equal to UI alert action. You're going to give it a title, something like random trivia. Let's just set the UI, wait, you're not going to create a UI alert action. You're going to create a UI alert controller. Then you're going to give it a title. This time, let's actually give it the random trivia title. Oh, trivia. Then the message is going to be something like just the trivia, maybe. And then the preferred style is UI alert controller style alert. In fact, because we're using Swift, we don't need to specify where that enum is. Now you're going to add an action to this. This time you're actually going to create a UI alert action. Let's just call this OK. Let's have the default style, and let's give it no handler because I don't care what happens when the person says OK. From there, we should be able to present that action. Let's animate that, and I don't want any completion handlers. So now you should have a really simple application that just displays random trivia every time you click the button. You just need to create the user interface now, so you just get some kind of button. Again, you can design this however you want to. You could just say something like query trivia, and then you could just customize the interface however you want to, and once you're done, you go ahead and run the application on your phone. So I'm going to run this directly onto my device. As you can see, I am indeed still screen sharing over here. So Xcode is running the application, and once it's done installing the application to my device, it's going to launch. In theory, I should just be able to click the button and instantly get some trivia. There we go, the application is launching. I click the button, and any second now, we should get trivia. If not, we go back to Xcode and figure out why exactly it's not working. In this case, I forgot to connect the IBAction, and so it's not actually doing anything when the button is clicked. Rerun the application, go back to QuickTime to take a look at what my phone is doing, and there we go, Xcode says build has succeeded, of course. And now I should be able to actually click on Query Trivia and get some trivia. So I'm going to click. And there we go. Just like the application that I was showing you, it says 39 is the traditional number of times citizens of ancient Rome hit their slaves when beating them, referred to as 40 save 1. Okay, so random trivia. From there, we can go ahead and improve this with Siri shortcuts. Now is when the interesting part comes in. Of course, we have to start off with actually defining the shortcut. Remember the 3 main steps: define, donate, handle the shortcut. So let's start off with defining the shortcut. So I'm going to go ahead and just under this folder here, create a new file. And if you just scroll down, you should see a SiriKit intent definition file right there. You can call this whatever you want. I usually just call it intents because it contains all of the intents that you're going to need. And let's create a new intent called get trivia. Or let's just say get random trivia, because you could get specific number trivia as well. Okay, so get random trivia. Now, there's a category for these. In this case, you're just doing like view information. Of course, there are tons of other different categories. It really depends on what your application needs. In this case, you are viewing some trivia, so I guess we'll just call it view. Title, let's just say get random trivia. And then description, let's say random trivia from numbers API. I'm not going to provide an image, and I do not need user confirmation to get trivia. Parameters, the user will provide none. However, if there were some parameters that you wanted the user to provide, like for example, I want trivia about this specific number, then you would add those parameters here like so. You would add a parameter. You would say something like trivia topic. You can choose a type. Let's just say in this case it's a string, of course. You can even say if it's an array. And then from there, you would create the different shortcut types there are. Like, for example, if someone would only be able to ask for trivia if they provided the trivia topic, then you would click on the plus button here, say trivia topic, add shortcut type, and now, unless the user provides that specific parameter, they cannot use the shortcut. However, if they can also do it without providing it, then you just add a shortcut type without any parameters, and your code will just handle it from there. But in this case, you don't need to provide a trivia topic because there's nothing to provide, and you can just work with no parameters. Of course, it does support background execution because the application itself does not need to open every time. The response, however, still needs to be built. And in the response, the application is going to provide a property called trivia. It's going to be a string, and this is the result of the API. And here are some response templates. For a failure, let's just say, sorry, I wasn't able to complete the request to numbers API. But in case it actually did succeed, which we're hoping it always succeeds, I should be able to do, here's a fact for you, something of that sort, and then just add in this trivia variable, and Siri will respond with that trivia. And so that's exactly how the application is going to respond to different kinds of input that the application gives it. Now, though, we have to handle the intent itself. So we'll talk about how exactly you can donate intents a little later. First, let's talk about handling the intent. So go back to your Xcode project and add a new target to your application. In this case, we're going to add an intents extension, and you can call this whatever you'd like to. Let's just say trivia intents. Now, if you'd like to create a UI for your shortcut, you can include a UI extension. I do not usually. And your starting point can either be messaging or none. Let's start with none. That'll be easier. Click on Finish, and as you can see, it asks you to activate the scheme, activate it, and then it creates these two files for you. Inside of the intent handler, this is what's going to actually handle the intent itself. Now, let's ignore this class for a minute. First, let's create another class. This is going to be called, well, the getRandomTrivia intent handler. It's going to inherit from NSObject, or it's going to conform to NSObject, and getRandom, first let's build, And one more step you should definitely take is go to your intent definition file and actually add it to the trivia intents target. Because what's happening right now is that the intents definition is only part of your application intent. It's not part of the Siri kit. Oh, sorry, it's only part of the application target. It's not part of the Siri kit target. So you need to make sure to add it to the Siri kit target so we can actually access that intent from here as well. Anyway, so as I was saying, create this class and make it also conform to get random trivia intent handling. Then inside of here, you need to actually implement two functions. First of all, the confirm function and also the handle function. These two functions will actually control whether or not your handler can actually provide output for what the user gave. Now over here though, in the intent handler, what you're going to do is say something like guard intent is get random trivia intent, else create a fatal error, unhandled intent, otherwise just return get random trivia intent handler. So essentially what this is saying is every time an intent that's linked to your application is called, this intent handler will be called. Now this intent handler this specific function will be called, and it's going to provide the intent that was called. Now the thing is, the only intent that I'm actually working for right now is the get random trivia intent. So if the intent is a get random trivia intent, then go ahead. But if it's not, which is where this else and the guard comes in, then just create a fatal error and crash the application because for some reason we're getting an intent that does not, that should not be linked to the application. However, there is a little bit more stuff you need to do. For example, go over to info.plist. Under NS extension attributes and intent supported, make sure that you add the extension or the intent that you are creating. In this case, it's going to be get random trivia intent, just exactly what your intent's name is here, just so that Siri knows. And then you're also going to need to add the app transport security over here as well. So you're going to add that dictionary, then add that row. So you're going to say, oh, no, you don't want to add that row there. You want to add that row inside of this dictionary. Allow arbitrary loads, yes. Then go back to your intent handler, and now you can actually start working with the intent. Now inside of confirm, for this very simple use case, we're going to assume that the application will always be able to deal with the intent. So I'm just going to say completion, get random trivia intent response, code.ready, so that Siri knows that we're ready and we're not going to provide any user activity. Now handle is where things get interesting. Now, first of all, how Siri can handle the intent? It's not going to access this IB action. What it's going to do is it's going to access this trivia class, but there's a problem. See, when SiriKit queries the application, it's querying the trivia intents target, but the trivia class is inside of the number trivia YouTube target. So either I could copy and paste the code, which is not an elegant solution, or I could create an embedded framework, which is the most elegant solution. But for a very simple application like this one with less than 20 lines of code, that is overkill. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the right of my screen over here, and I'm going to check mark trivia intents. That means it's going to add this trivia class to the trivia intents target. Now, if I were to build this, you should get an error. As you can see, no such module Lamofire. But you may say, we added a Lamofire in the CocoaPod file. But you have to realize that this error is not being thrown by the application, it's being thrown by the SiriKit intent handler target. So what happened here is if I were to go back to my terminal and open up the pod file, you'll realize that only the target number trivia YouTube actually has the Lamofire pod. So what I need to do is go ahead and add a new target, in this case trivia intents, and tell it to use frameworks, and also tell it to pod a Lamofire. There we go. Just like that, I have created this this new pod file, I can run pod install. And theoretically, once pod is done installing, again, CocoaPods is a great tool. But if I were to go ahead and run this, I shouldn't get any errors now, but we're not done just yet. So give that just a moment to build. There we go, build succeeded. Now I can go over to my intent handler and actually handle the intent. So I should be able to just simply create a new trivia instance, get some trivia, save it in the trivia variable, and then just say completion dot success provided the trivia, and there we go. That theoretically should be all we need to implement Siri shortcuts. But there's a problem. Short's implemented, short works, but Siri still doesn't know that this is a thing because we're not donating it. So go back to your view controller, and right as you're done providing trivia to the user, donate this intent to Siri so that Siri knows that the user has gotten this trivia. So I'm going to create a new interaction object called inInteraction after I import the intents framework. So I'm going to create a new inInteraction with an intent called getRandomTriviaIntent, and there's going to be no response, and I'm going to donate this with no completion. And just like that, it should donate the intent to SiriKit, and it should therefore, in theory at least, work. Now we're ready to test out the application and make sure that it actually does function the way that we want it to. I'm going to run the application target on my phone, and as you can see, it opens up. Just like so. There's a little bit of lag between what you're seeing on screen and what's actually happening on my phone, but if I were to click on Query Trivia, it shows me trivia, and it does not crash the application, meaning that it is successfully at least donating the intent. Here it says 56 is the age of Mao Zedong, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, when the People's Republic of China was established on October 1st, 1949. Pretty interesting trivia, actually. So there we go. That's done. Now remember, in the developer tab, I had already turned on the show recent shortcuts and donations option. So if I were to scroll up, as you can see, it should show you in just one moment that indeed, there we go. The Number Trivia YouTube over here, this new application that we just developed, is showing me the Get Random Trivia intent. If I click on it, the intent is handled perfectly. It says 3 is the number of notes in a triad, the basic form of any chord. Now we can go ahead and develop a new shortcut. Let's create inside of the Siri Shortcuts workflow application a new shortcut. And this time, let's go ahead and search for something like, say, trivia. So now we have to figure out exactly which one is the new application. So the second one is the new application because this is Number Trivia YouTube. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to say add to this shortcut. And just like that, as you can see, any second now, it should add this as an action in the shortcut workflow. I can then go ahead, give it a name, new trivia, go back. If I want to, I can add it to Siri. I can say something like, show me new trivia. There we go. I can just click on done. Again, there's a little bit of a lag between the actual screen share here. But I'm going to click on done, and as you can see, it provides me a new shortcut. I'm going to click on new trivia, and within the application, it is handled successfully. But what's interesting is if I go into Siri, any second now, of course, sometimes it does take a second to register in the actual Siri sort of application, but I should be able to say, show me a new trivia.
Number Trivia YouTube says, here's a fact for you. 94 is the length of an NBA court in feet. That's done.
And just like that, a new application that uses Siri shortcuts and is able to recommend to me exactly what I want to do, when I want to do it, completely automatically without you having to do it manually. So For example, if Siri recognizes a pattern in when you like trivia, it'll automatically recommend that to you in Spotlight, on your home screen, on your widget screen, all that kind of stuff. And so that was a quick tutorial as to how you can use Siri shortcuts and the new custom intents that Apple lets you use in your applications. I do hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in today. Of course, all this code will be available in the description below if you'd like to follow along, if you'd like to download the code or use it in your own applications. Apart from that, if you do have any suggestions, feedback, or questions, please do feel free to leave it down in the comment section below, as I'd love to answer any questions you may have. Apart from that, if you did like this video, please make sure to leave a like down below, and if you believe this could be helpful to anyone you know, like your family or friends, please do make sure to share the video as well. Apart from that, if you really do like my content and you want to see more of it, please do make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, as it really does help out a lot. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I release new content, click on the little bell icon beside the subscribe button, and you will receive an email and a Google notification every time I release a new video. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining in today. That's going to be what I had for this tutorial. Goodbye.